They came not as warriors, but as ghosts descending from mountains no army should have crossed. Elephants trudging through snow, men freezing in passes where the gods themselves feared to walk. In 218 BC, Hannibal attacked Saguntum, an ally of Rome, sparking the Second Punic War. He invaded Italy by crossing the Alps with North African war elephants, a feat Romans believed impossible. But by August 2nd, 216 BC, at a dusty plain called Cannae, Rome would learn something far more terrifying than what was impossible. They would learn what genius looked like when it turned their greatest strengths into their deadliest weaknesses. Before we dive into how one man shattered an empire's pride, drop a comment below and let us know where you're watching from. And if this story gives you chills, smash that like button. It helps us bring you more forgotten battles that changed history. Hannibal's army numbered 38,000 infantry, 8,000 cavalry, and 38 elephants when they left Spain for their impossible journey. They numbered 70,000 men, 20,000 horses, and 37 elephants marching toward a mountain range that had never been crossed by an army. The Romans laughed. Let him try, they said. The Alps would do what Roman swords could not, destroy Hannibal before he ever reached Italy. When Hannibal's army finally reached the Alps in late September or early October 218 BC, winter was fast approaching. Livy imagined the scene. The dreadful vision was now before their eyes. The towering peaks, the snow-clad pinnacles soaring to the sky, the rude huts clinging to the rocks, beasts and cattle shriveled and parched with cold. The people with their wild and ragged hair, all nature, animate and inanimate, stiff with frost. His soldiers must have felt terror gripping their hearts. These were men from Africa and Spain, warriors who had never seen snow, now staring at white mountains that seemed to pierce heaven itself. But Hannibal didn't give speeches about glory. He gave them a choice, forward or death. There was no going back. The climb began. Local tribesmen appeared all around them, launching attacks from above. The Centrones positioned themselves on slopes parallel to Hannibal's army and used higher ground to roll boulders and rain rocks down, killing many pack animals. Men screamed as rocks crushed them. Horses fell into crevasses. The cold ate through clothing designed for Mediterranean heat. Many soldiers succumbed to frostbite, hunger, or exhaustion, while others perished in avalanches or rock slides. Yet the army pushed forward, one frozen step at a time. And then there were the elephants. The enemy were terrified by their strange appearance and never dared approach the part of the column in which they were stationed. Polybius wrote, "Those massive beasts became psychological weapons, forcing tribal warriors to think twice before attacking." Hannibal managed to march his army across the Alps in just 16 days. 16 days of hell that should have broken any army. During the passage, Hannibal lost about half of his troops. Only about 40,000 made it to Italy. Most of the elephants perished from the unusually cold winter of 218–217, with only one surviving, an Indian elephant believed to have been named Surus, carrying Hannibal himself. But half an army that crossed the impossible was still enough to terrify Rome. In his first few years in Italy, he won victories at the Battle of Ticinus, Trebia, and Lake Trasimene, inflicting heavy losses on the Romans. 3 times Rome sent legions. 3 times Hannibal crushed them with tactics they'd never seen before. Rome panicked. The Senate appointed Quintus Fabius Maximus as dictator, who adopted a strategy of harassing Hannibal through strategic movements and brief skirmishes rather than full engagement. They called him the delayer. He understood something critical. You don't beat genius by fighting on genius's terms. But the Roman people didn't want patience. They wanted blood. They wanted their legendary legions to prove that Rome was invincible. They wanted vengeance for 2 years of humiliation. So Rome made a decision that would haunt them forever. The Senate determined to bring 8 legions into the field, which had never been done at Rome before. Over 80,000 infantry and 6,000 cavalry, the largest army Rome had ever fielded. 2 consuls were elected to command, Lucius Aemilius Paulus and Gaius Terentius Varro. Paulus was a veteran from an established military family, justifiably cautious about facing Hannibal. Varro was a plebeian consular appointee, and ancient sources describe him as overconfident and rash, hoping he could overwhelm Hannibal with sheer numbers. One wanted caution, the other wanted glory. That division would prove catastrophic. In June 216 BC, Hannibal made his move. He left winter quarters at Geronium and moved toward Cannae, deliberately occupying the ruined fortress, which was a grain and food storage site serving the entire region. It was brilliant provocation. Occupying the area threatened food production for the whole region, something the Romans could not ignore without appearing helpless in front of their local allies. Hannibal had his battlefield. Now he just needed Rome to arrive. And they came. In July 216 BC, Paulus and Varro led their force to confront Hannibal at Cannae. When the Roman army reached the plains, the consuls argued. Paulus worried that the broad, flat plain was perfect for cavalry actions at which the Carthaginians excelled. Varro vehemently disagreed. Roman law required the consuls to alternate command daily. The divided leadership had already begun to crack. On August 1st, they deployed but didn't fight. Tensions rose. Soldiers whispered in the camps. Everyone could feel it. Something massive was coming. Then August 2nd, 216 BC arrived. Varro took command. He wanted battle. He wanted glory. And Hannibal gave him exactly what he wanted. Hannibal positioned his lines facing north, compelling the Romans to face mostly south, where the hot libeccio wind blew dust and grit into their eyes. It was a small detail, but Hannibal understood that battles were won in small details. According to Polybius, Hannibal had around 40,000 infantry and 10,000 cavalry. The Romans outnumbered him nearly 2-to-1 in infantry. By all Roman logic, they should win. If you're enjoying this tactical masterclass, hit that subscribe button. We're breaking down the battles that shaped civilization, and you don't want to miss what's coming next. The Romans formed a densely packed center with less emphasis on cavalry support on the flanks. Varro hoped to break through Hannibal's center using sheer weight and manpower. It was the Roman way. Mass your forces, push forward like a battering ram, overwhelm through superior numbers and discipline. Hannibal knew they would do exactly that, and he'd built his entire battle plan around it. Hannibal's crescent formation appeared vulnerable. His center protruded forward, tempting the Romans into a headlong push. On the wings, elite African infantry stood slightly behind the front line, ready to spring the trap. The battle horn sounded. The Roman infantry advanced in a deep formation with the intention of smashing Hannibal's line. 80,000 men marching in perfect formation, shields locked, swords ready. It must have looked unstoppable, a tide of bronze and iron flowing across the plain. The Roman infantry charged directly at the Carthaginian center, and hand-to-hand combat was fierce. Hannibal himself stood in the center of the line to fight with his men, encouraging them to hold as long as they could. The Romans pushed. The Carthaginian center gave ground. Slowly, deliberately. To the Romans, It looked like victory. They pressed harder, driving deeper into Hannibal's line, their formation compressing as more troops pushed from behind, eager to join the slaughter. That's when the trap began to close. As the Roman infantry kept pushing forward, Hannibal slowly let his line be pushed backwards, which meant that the bulging center of the crescent gradually inverted. And the edges of the Carthaginian line were now located on the sides of the massed Roman formation. The Romans had walked into a killing box, and they didn't even realize it yet. The Carthaginian cavalry on the wings rode past the infantry and attacked the Roman cavalry waiting behind their troops. Hasdrubal Gisco led the Carthaginian cavalry on the left wing and routed the Roman cavalry opposite, then swept around the rear of the Romans to attack their cavalry on the other wing. Within minutes, both wings of Roman cavalry were shattered. Thousands of horsemen fled the field in panic. And then Hasdrubal did something that would be studied in military academies for the next 2,000 years. Instead of chasing the fleeing horsemen for glory and plunder, he wheeled his cavalry around and crashed into the rear of the Roman legions. The Romans were now completely surrounded. The surviving Romans, perhaps as many as 70,000 men, were totally encircled. Hannibal's tactical masterpiece was complete. What followed wasn't a battle. It was systematic annihilation. The corralled legionaries showed no signs of surrender, so the Carthaginians closed in and began the grisly work of cutting them down, one man at a time. Over the next several hours, the plain at Cannae turned into a killing field. The Romans fought with desperate courage. They died in formation, shields locked, refusing to break even as death closed in from all sides. Livy later wrote, "Some were discovered lying there alive, with thighs and tendons slashed, baring their necks and throats, and bidding their conquerors drain the remnant of their blood. Others were found with their heads buried in holes dug in the ground. They had apparently made these pits for themselves, and heaping the dirt over their faces, shut off their breath. They chose suffocation over surrender. That was the Roman spirit, unbreakable even in total defeat. The casualties were staggering. Roman losses ranged from 55,000, according to Livy, to 70,000, according to Polybius. Among the Roman dead were Consul Aemilius Paulus, 28 of 40 tribunes, up to 80 Romans of senatorial or high magistrate rank, and at least 200 knights. It was estimated that 20% of Roman fighting men between the ages of 18 and 50 died at Cannae. The Carthaginians lost about 6,000 men, nearly 10-to-1 casualties against a numerically superior force. Adrian Goldsworthy equates the death toll at Cannae to the massed slaughter of the British army on the first day of the Somme. In just one afternoon, Rome lost more soldiers than America would lose at Gettysburg 2,000 years later. The Battle of Cannae is regarded as one of the greatest tactical feats in military history and one of the worst defeats in Roman history. Historian Will Durant wrote, "It was a supreme example of generalship never bettered in history, and it set the lines of military tactics for 2,000 years. The double envelopment, the pincer movement. Every military commander from Alexander to Patton would study what Hannibal did that day. Cannae became a model for future military strategy and is studied in military academies to this day. When word of the massacre reached Rome, panic gripped the city. Multitudes thronged the streets," Appian wrote, uttering lamentations for their relatives, calling on them by name, and bewailing their own fate as soon to fall into the enemy's hands. In their desperation, the Romans dispatched a senator to the Greek oracle at Delphi to divine the meaning of the tragedy. They even conducted human sacrifices to appease the gods. Then came the moment that confused historians for centuries. Hannibal was exhorted to march on Rome by Hannibal, one of his commanders, but Hannibal did not do so. Livy reports that Hannibal told Hannibal, "You know how to win battles, but not how to take advantage of them." "In 5 days you could be dining on the Capitol," Hannibal supposedly said. Why didn't Hannibal march? Scholars note many good reasons. Rome's defenses were formidable. His army was exhausted. He lacked siege equipment. His strategic aim was not the destruction of Rome, but to dishearten the Romans through carnage and wear them down by stripping them of their allies. Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery believed Hannibal was right. When a more powerful adversary is down, he must be dispatched. History would prove Montgomery correct. Hannibal's hesitation gave Rome time to do something extraordinary. They refused to surrender. Following a brief period of mourning, Rome's Senate rejected Hannibal's peace offers and refused to ransom his Cannae prisoners. Think about that. Thousands of their sons, brothers, and fathers were held captive. Hannibal offered to return them for gold. Rome said no. The citizenry was put to work making new arms, and the army was rebuilt by lowering the recruitment age, enlisting convicts, and even offering slaves their freedom. Livy wrote, "Certainly there is no other nation that would not have succumbed beneath such a weight of calamity." The defeat at Cannae led to reforms, including more flexible troop formations, the transition from the manipular to cohort system, and unified command under generals like Scipio Africanus. Rome learned from Hannibal. They studied his tactics. They adapted his strategies. And eventually, they turned his own genius against him. After Cannae, the Romans adopted the Fabian strategy, avoiding direct engagement and instead waging a war of attrition. A new Roman general named Scipio, who had survived the carnage at Cannae, invaded Iberia to deny it to Hannibal as a source of supply. Slowly, methodically, Rome strangled Hannibal's position in Italy. Hannibal occupied most of southern Italy for 15 years, undefeated on Italian soil. But cut off from reinforcements, watching his allies slowly fall away, his position became untenable. In 202 BC, Hannibal was finally recalled to Africa to defend Carthage itself. At the Battle of Zama, Scipio Africanus, the student who had learned from the master, defeated Hannibal using tactics adapted from Cannae itself. Carthage lost approximately 20,000 troops, with an additional 15,000 wounded. The Romans suffered 2,500 casualties. The tables had completely turned. But Cannae's lesson remained eternal. The Battle of Cannae became the inspiration for Germany's battle plan at the start of World War I. The famous Schlieffen Plan, a massive double envelopment à la Cannae. It failed. Even genius can be too clever by half. What Hannibal proved at Cannae wasn't just about tactics. It was about understanding your enemy so completely that you turn their greatest strengths into fatal weaknesses. The Romans' massive numbers became a liability in the killing box. Their discipline kept them fighting in formation, even as they were surrounded. Their courage kept them from surrendering, even when surrender might have saved lives. Hannibal understood psychology as much as he understood warfare. He knew Rome would send its biggest army. He knew they would try to overwhelm him with numbers. He knew their pride would make them attack. And he turned all of it into death. Cannae taught the world that sometimes the greatest weapon isn't strength. It's knowing exactly how your enemy will use theirs, and being ready when they do. If you learned something new today, Drop a like and comment where you're watching from. And subscribe, because next week we're uncovering another battle where impossible odds were shattered by pure genius. You won't want to miss it.